Hi friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. Today I'm going to tell you about all the books that I read during the second half of March. I had a plan at the beginning of the month to read a book a day, and I'm very glad to say that I succeeded. I did read 31 books in the month of March. I thought it was 32 when I got to the end of the month, but now I feel like I'm missing something. But I do have 31 books in total, and I'm not going to talk about all of them because I already talked about this stack here, as well as the two adult books, or the one YA and another adult book that I read. So I already covered a bunch of them. And I'm not going to talk about the 6 Newbery books that I read during my Newbery weekend because they are all nicely organized up on my Newbery shelf, but I will link those 2 videos in the description below. I'm also today not going to talk about the 3 books that I read like Amanda, because I recently just posted a video sharing about that project as well. But because I haven't wrapped them up officially, those books were Everything Else in the Universe by Tracy Holzer, which I loved. When the World Was Ours by Liz Kessler, which was a bit of a disappointment for me, and The Prophet Calls by Melanie Sumrau, which I also really enjoyed. So those 3 books are in a video of their own that will also be linked down below. But I do have a bunch of quite a few more. So let's just jump right in. I was going to have some organization to this. Let me see. So the 2 priority reads for me this month obviously were A Rover Story by Jasmine Warga, which was our group read for middle grade March. And I guess I'll start here. I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it was very sweet. It did a great job of kind of getting us into the mind of Rez, short for Resilience, who is a rover that went to Mars. And we start the book in the lab where scientists are working on and engineers are working on Rez to make this rover ready to go to Mars. Throughout the course of the book, Rez gets human emotions. He starts to experience human emotions and evaluate human emotions. And there were just some really poignant moments in here. It was very sweet and very simple. I loved the ending. I did tear up a little bit, but of the 3 honestly, of the 3 Jasmine Warga books I've read, this is probably my 3rd favorite. I liked the other 2 a bit better, but I did still really enjoy this story very much. Had some funny moments, some sweet moments. Yeah, very good. And then the other priority read for me this month was The Watsons Go to Birmingham 1963. This is by Christopher Paul Curtis. And this one was my Patreon book club book for the month of March. This is one that has been on my shelves for quite a while and has been recommended to me quite a few times. I have enjoyed Bud Not Buddy, the Newbery winner by Christopher Paul Curtis, and I definitely want to read more books by him. I thought this could be better. I feel like it took a long time to get on the road. My understanding going into it was we were going to follow this family as they travel to Birmingham in the summer of 1963. It actually wasn't in the summer. It was in the winter. They're in Flint, Michigan, and it's freezing cold. They're very, very cold. And so they go visit family in Birmingham, Alabama. But in the 1960s, that's in the midst of the Civil Rights Movement and the Jim Crow South, and things in Alabama are very different from Flint, Michigan. What I loved about this book was the family dynamics. The mom and the dad were fantastically portrayed. The sibling group was just really cool. The older brother was quite a bully and had a lot of anger issues. We hear the story from the middle brother's perspective, and then the little sister was just really precious. The older brother was just mean, not only to his family, but also at school as well. And I really didn't care for him, but I liked the arc that he was given. Like by the end, things that he learned and saw changed him a bit, and I do appreciate that. This was told in almost like short stories, very episodic, especially at the beginning. Once they got on the road, I got into the style of the book a little better, but at the beginning, it felt a little choppy and disjointed, and maybe that prevented me from liking it very much. And I also listened to this on audio, and LeVar Burton of Reading Rainbow fame and Star Trek was the narrator. At first, I thought I was going to love his narration. And in between each chapter, there was this music that played, and I thought it was just going to be a very cool listening experience, but I ended up really not liking it, and I found it to be almost too cheesy. I probably would have enjoyed it more if I had just read the book. However, we did have a really good discussion about this book, and found a lot of value in the book, even if it wasn't a huge hit for most of us. There was a couple people who really loved it, but for most of us, it was just okay and a good read. Definitely has value, but wasn't a favorite. I made some progress in some series towards the end of this month, and I also started another series, so let's do all those next. I did finish the third Gaither's Sister book. This is Gone Crazy in Alabama by Rita Williams Garcia. The first one I read was One Crazy Summer, and then I also listened to the middle one, PSB 11, and then I finished it out with Gone Crazy in Alabama, where we follow these three sisters as they go down to visit Big Mama in Alabama. I read this one at a very similar time of reading this one, and that might have also affected my enjoyment of both. But I do love the sister dynamics in here. I, however, thought the middle sister got away with a lot that she maybe shouldn't have. I really could relate a lot more with the older sister and could understand her motivations and stuff. And she kept getting in trouble or being not yelled at exactly, but challenged in the way she thought, which is good, but I also could understand where she was coming from, and I don't think she was given a lot of grace, whereas the middle sister was a pain in the rear some of the time and was given a lot of grace by everyone around them, and I just didn't understand why that was the case. And so this was probably my least favorite of the three. I think One Crazy Summer was my favorite, and then it went downhill from there, but I'm glad I finished a whole series. Yay for completing a series. And then I read two more books in Catherine Arden's kind of creepy series. I don't know if there's a name to this series, but the first one was Small Spaces, and I read that in February to read like Keisha, and then I did pick up Dead Voices and Dark Waters. Oh yeah, this is the one that I read at the beginning of the month. I thought my counting was off, so there was 15. I've already talked about Dead Voices in that mid-month wrap-up, but I really enjoyed this one, even though it was very creepy, even creepier to me than Small Spaces was. Deals with some mean ghosts. Not a fan. And then in this one, the Smiling Man comes back and we deal with Dark Waters. We've been following a group of three friends all the way through in this series. They're the ones that were able to kind of save the day in the first book. And then also they have the challenge in Dead Voices to deal with. And then in this one, the boy of this group of three, there's two girls and a boy. And in this one, Brian kind of gets to shine a little bit more, but they go on this sailboat ride, but it's a little bit misty, and mist and mirrors are very dangerous. And so this one deals with some monsters and sea monsters and was pretty creepy. I will say it's my least favorite of the three so far. There is one more that I think is going to wrap up this series that I don't have checked out from the library. So I'll have to get that and finish up this series as well. But I enjoy it. It's totally out of my comfort zone, my normal comfort zone. But they're kind of fun to read some creepy stories. The other series that I made progress on, I started this month. The first one, it was Garlic and the Vampire, and I thought it was much better than this one. Super cute kind of graphic novel about these vegetables that come to life. And this one, we get a little bit of their origin story and like the metamorphosis, if you will, of these animals, and a little bit more about the witch as well. I just didn't care for this one nearly as much as the first one. I didn't think it had a story that flowed as well as the first one. The art was still super cute, and it was a fun read, quick read, but it wasn't, it was just okay for me. That's all. Just okay. And then the series that I started towards the end of the month is Chains by Laurie Halse Anderson. This is from the Seeds of America trilogy. I read this with Becca from Becca Books and Bujo. Really loved getting to read a book with her, finally. We have a lot of overlap in our reading taste, so it was fun to read with her. But this one takes place during the Revolutionary War, and we follow two sisters, Isabel and Ruth, who at the very beginning of the book are with their mother, or are with a woman who owns them, if you will, in Rhode Island, if you will. Yeah, she owned them. And she was going to set them free, but her young whippersnapper of a nephew came right at the end of her life, was just going to come for a visit, but stayed because he could tell she was dying, and then he snatched up all of her fortune. The girls and others told him that that she had paperwork that was going to set them free, and he refused to do any of the research into that, and then ended up selling them to a horrible family that were Tories in New York City in the midst of the beginnings of the revolution, 1776. So they're with this family who's just awful in New York City, and we're getting to see it through the eyes of Isabel, who's our narrator, as she learns to navigate the city, as she sees the rebels or the colonists trying to fight against the Tories, or those who are loyal to the king, the loyalists, and has to decide for herself which side she's going to fall on. And she really doesn't care. She just wants her freedom. She wants to protect her sister. And a lot of really tough stuff happens in this book. It was very emotional. It kept me on the edge of my seat. I just wanted to keep reading to find out what was going to happen next. I did think the ending of this one was a little bit abrupt, not necessarily even a cliffhanger, but it just felt like the ending showed up and then it was over. I was like, wait a minute. I wasn't ready for it to be over when it ended. But that's okay, because it's the first in a trilogy. So hopefully the next two will continue this story a little bit more. But I really did enjoy reading this one and loved reading with Becca. I did read this year's Newbery winner, Free Water by Amina Lukman Dawson. This one takes place in the South, and we follow mainly Homer and his sister, who have just run off from the plantation where they live, and they were going to run off with their mom, but for some reason the mom didn't make it with them. We follow Homer and his sister as they make their way across the river and into a swamp, and discover Free Water, which is this village of freed or runaway enslaved people who have created this little haven for themselves in the middle of the swamp. And I really enjoyed learning about how they survived out there. They had their own little cornfields and gardens to grow food. They were self-sustaining and had a whole system of people who were watching, but danger kept creeping up on them as some people were selling off trees in the swamp, and the bounty hunters, if you will, were on the hunt for those who had run off, and the danger was intense and it was high. I did enjoy Homer's and Anna's story. However, there were about, 6 or 7 different perspectives that we got in here, and I felt like it was too many perspectives, because we also follow another little girl who has always lived in the swamp, in Free Water. She's never really been outside of Free Water zone at all, and just wants to be brave like some of these other scouts and like her dad, and she wants to try to catch a pig. Like, she just actually got under my skin a little bit. She was super annoying by the end, and that might be partly the narration I was listening to. Might also just be that this girl was a little too much for me, but I can understand that desire to get out, but she just was very naive. And then we also got perspective of a couple different people that were still back at the plantation where Homer and his sister ran from. We get their perspective as well. And I thought it was good, not great. So it's always interesting to me why books win the Newbery. And I do think that this gives good perspectives, and it had a compelling story. I liked the different perspectives. It just kept me from fully connecting with Homer's story. I wish almost that it stayed with one, but in order to give the broad picture, that's just the way that she chose to tell the story. So it was good. I'm glad that I read it, and it will go up now onto my Newbery shelf as the most recent winner. And then finally, book 31, if you will, I whipped out this little tiny essay by Katherine Rundell that we talked about in one of our lives this month, but this is Why You Should Read Children's Books Even Though You Are So Old and Wise by Katherine Rundell. And this, I believe, is a speech or an essay that she wrote just about why adults should read children's books. And it's fabulous. I underlined and marked quite a few different spots in here. She just encourages adults to reconnect with that part of themselves that they had forgotten, with hope, with light. There's just one quote towards the end: read a children's book to remember what it was to long for impossible and perhaps not impossible things. Go to children's fiction to see the world with double eyes, your own and those of your childhood self. Refuse unflinchingly to be embarrassed, and in exchange you get the second star to the right and straight on till morning. That's how it ends, and it's just really lovely. I feel like this is something I could reread every year and encourage others to read who are questioning why middle grade March. This is why. The children's books are important, not just for kids, for us adults too. And that is that. That is the end. I did not read any adult books towards the end of the month, only middle grade. And I finished 31 altogether, which is amazing. 32 maybe. I still feel like I might be missing something. But I would love to chat with you. How did your middle grade March go if you participated? Remember, if you read only one middle grade, you're still a participant. You did it. You completed the challenge. But I would love to hear, how was your reading in the month of March? What was your favorite book that you read? And anything else that you want to share with me down in the comments. I love talking with you down there. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to talking with you in another video very soon. Bye.